27th of July. The SBU attacked objects of Russia's nuclear triad. Something's on fire. Factories that produce the formidable Topol and Yar's intercontinental nuclear ballistic missiles have been completely blown up. What a truly massive boom, bada boom.
What's that?
Russia's nuclear triad is under attack. The second phase of the SBU special operation continues. Attacks on Russia's Northern and Pacific fleets, attacks on nuclear submarines, the explosion of the Crimean Bridge, and strikes on airfields with strategic nuclear aviation. A series of explosions in Crimea. There's panic and evacuation there.
Oh my God, can we see? Oh, friends, this moment for all us with news about an emergency incident that occurred on the Crimean Bridge. God damn. Here we go. Emergency situation on the Crimean Bridge. As a result of the incident, car traffic on the Crimean Bridge has been stopped. All guests and residents of Crimea are asked to use the land corridor. Accordingly, through the new regions of the Russian Federation.
We'll discuss all of this today with Dmitry Gordon, as usual, right now.
There's the petrochemical people again.
Let's see. Sensational news. America is ready for war with Russia because Senator Lindsey Graham stated that if Russia doesn't stop, it will be like with Iran. The US will strike at the Kremlin's and Crimea's nuclear infrastructure, Tomahawks, JSMs, Taurus missiles, Ukrainian ballistic missiles. Against the backdrop of all these explosions in Sevastopol, the destruction of the Black Sea Fleet, attacks on submarines.
Wow.
This is no longer a threat. This is a real plan. According to intelligence, there are nuclear warhead storage sites, strategic air bases, and facilities of the Russian Federation's triad in Crimea. That's exactly where it could hit. Panic among the command, evacuations from Sevastopol, explosions in Dzhankoi, Kursk, Moscow, and the Moscow region. America has warned of the next strike on Russia. What does this mean? As usual, we're discussing this with Dmitry Gordon. Dmitry Ilyich, welcome.
Hello, Dasha. And hello to our esteemed audience.
Friends, as always, please like this video. In the comments, let us know what you think about strikes on Russia's nuclear triad, about, let's say, Lindsey Graham's threats, and about the possibility of Ukraine receiving JSM and Tomahawk missiles. Dmitry Ilyich, the floor is yours.
Tomahawks and Tamamiavsky. So here's what I think about strikes on the nuclear triad. The Americans will not strike the nuclear triad. That's out of the question. There's really nothing to discuss here because, well, they just won't do it. That's all. It's impossible.
Strategic military airfield, so the special operation of Putin. These are nuclear facilities, the Pacific Fleet, the Northern Fleet, strategic aviation. That's all of it.
The Americans, or rather, it wasn't even the Americans who struck once.
I'm hinting that it was done with our own hands.
With our own hands? That's quite possible. You see? Well, not directly at nuclear facilities, not at the silos, not at the nuclear missile storage. No, that's a red line, an international red line that no one will cross. I'm sure of that. As for Crimea, here there's room for possibilities and room for imagination. A huge amount is concentrated in Crimea. Well, the Russians have turned Crimea into a military base. Crimea used to be a place for people to relax. But now it's a military base, well fortified, with nuclear warheads, apparently, and with a huge number of troops, equipment, and everything that goes along with it. Crimea is the territory of Ukraine. Let me remind you, in case anyone has forgotten. So whatever we want to do with our own territory, we do. If we have something that allows us to do something, then naturally the cards are in our hands. Of course, ideally, to cut off, to block Crimea. How exactly? Bomb everything in Crimea that is related to military infrastructure. Everything. Take out everything possible, even the impossible. Bomb the Crimean Bridge, so there's no way to deliver ammunition and so on. Bomb the railroad that the Russians built to Mariupol. and then there will be an ambush, then a siege, then a blockade, then it'll be a real mess. That's it. But in order to do this, of course, we know all the coordinates, everything well, absolutely everything is known. To do this, we need missiles. We need a political decision. There is a political decision, there is political will, the missiles are already available, and more are on the. So I think there's a high probability that Crimea will get hit hard. I really think the probability is very high.
And I think our audience will join in the comments. Write down below whether you agree with Dmitry Ilyich and what you think the probability is in percentage terms. We are very interested. Dmitry Ilyich, I also just...
Crimea is just asking for it, Dasha. Crimea is asking to be hit hard. Well, it's asking for it because, I repeat, it's our territory. There's a lot of enemy military force and equipment there. And in order to, first of all, you can certainly make them flee without even having our own troops actually enter the sovereign territory of Crimea. This is indeed a truly unique and quite significant situation, because if you effectively cut off the crucial bridge and the essential railway, they'll only have the very limited ferry crossing left to rely upon. And if you take everything out well, they'll run just like they run from the Kharkiv region back then. From Kherson, they'll have no choice but to flee. So, again, this gives the military plenty of room for productive work.
I'd even say, let them swim out of Crimea freestyle, breaststroke or doggy paddle as fast as they can. That would be really great. Dmitry Ilyich, so I did my homework. I just analyzed open sources to see how many possible nuclear sites or sites with strategic nuclear aviation there are, what Google tells me, and so on. There are dozens of military sites in Crimea that could be connected to the nuclear trial. These include the Saky airfield, the base in Dzhankoi, underground storage facilities in Feodosia, and the fleet in Sevastopol. And if a JAS missile or a long-range Neptune missile hits any one of them, that's not just a strike on Russia, it's the beginning of a new phase of the war. Dmitry Ilyich, can we do this using, for example, only Ukrainian missiles or, say, American missiles like JAS, for instance?
We can do this by using a combined strike, including actively employing naval drones as well. But regarding the naval fleet, the Black Sea fleet in Crimea, I wouldn't be so quick to say, because in my opinion, it's not there anymore.
They're all in Novorossiysk.
Yes, the entire fleet has holed up in Novorossiysk over there. I think part of it has already headed toward the shores of Abkhazia. They're also building facilities for them in the Okhamkhira area. Let me remind you, in case anyone's forgotten, Abkhazia is actually the territory of Georgia. There is no independent sovereign Abkhazia. It's Georgian territory, that's it. And I say this with great respect for the Abkhaz people. I've been there myself back in the day, in Gagra and Khudauda and Bokamkiri and a few other places. So I don't have any negative feelings toward the Abkhaz people. But Abkhazia is the territory of Georgia, and that's something we need to remember. It was the Russians who separated Abkhazia from Georgia. That was done by the Russians, let me remind you. Abkhaz and Georgians used to live together perfectly well, perfectly. And they will live well together again. And Ossetians too, they have families in common, and yet suddenly they were made into enemies. It's all the Russians, it's their tactic. They've always used this divide and conquer strategy throughout the former Soviet Union. And as a result, Armenians and Azerbaijanis, who seem to have a terrible enmity, are now about to sign a peace treaty, Armenia and Azerbaijan, without Russia's involvement. And who needs them anyway? Who are they to decide anything? And I'd like to point out, this is happening thanks to Ukraine. Because if Ukraine hadn't it hadn't bravely resisted Russia, neither Armenia nor Azerbaijan would have been able to raise their voice. We have to acknowledge that. Now, regarding the facilities you listed above, well, naturally, these military facilities are just asking for it. They're practically saying, attack me, attack. Exactly. Moreover, I repeat, we have all the necessary data. We have many partisans in Crimea, and there are still many people in Crimea who sympathize with Ukraine. Let's not forget that either. And of course, we have everything we need to strike. But with what should we strike? Well, we have a military command. They're smarter than I am. They'll decide.
Dmitry Ilyich, regarding an important topic, this is the second topic I've chosen. It's about Tomahawk and JASSM strikes, which have been hyped up in the media for several days now. What's going on? At first, there was a media leak. Supposedly, Trump spoke with Zelensky by phone and in a private conversation said, "Why aren't you striking St. Petersburg and Moscow?" And Zelensky asks, "But with what should we strike, Mr. Trump?" And at that point, Trump offers him American missiles, adjustments, and so on. This kind of informational story came out into the open. It forced Trump to defend himself, but the fact remains, Russian propaganda was furious. What does it mean to strike Moscow and St. Petersburg? Let's discuss the possibility that Ukraine has been given the green light to carry out attacks on Moscow and St. Petersburg on military targets.
Well, let me remind you that Ukraine has been striking both Moscow and St. Petersburg for quite some time now. With what? With drones? Not with missiles, with drones. We can recall a few years ago a Ukrainian drone over the Kremlin Dome on Red Square. It was clearly visible. It was shot down just as it was about to descend there. We remember 3 strikes in roughly the same spot in Moscow city. We remember drones over Moscow and over St. Petersburg. Yeah. That we remember. As for missile strikes, could Trump have said something like that? Well, of course, yes. Why not? Well, if Russia is striking Kyiv and other cities, the question naturally arises. Trump was right to ask Zelensky, why aren't you striking back? And Zelensky answered correctly, well, give us missiles that can reach there and we will strike. And of course, Trump understands, well, not just Trump, any reasonable person understands that to force the enemy to make peace, you need to take a whole series of mirror symmetrical actions, such as, for example, if Kyiv is struck and the sky over Kyiv is black, immediately there is a strike on Moscow. The sky over Moscow is black. And the question is asked, so how do you like that? How's the mood now? Are you going to keep striking? We will. Let's strike. They strike again, we strike again. Until they start thinking, and you have to strike at Moscow. Petersburg is, well, Petersburg is something else. I stick to the following logic. All major and minor affairs are always handled in the capitals of states. All uprisings start in the capitals. All decisions are made in the capital. So if Ukraine strikes, of course, it's very important whether it's at Yeltsin or at Alabuga or at, say, Tambov, where there's a gunpowder factory. I'll soon know all the Russian military industry sites by heart. That's the military industrial complex. That's all well and good. But Moscow, the war indeed must come directly to Moscow. Moscow must feel what war is. Because even though there are certainly enough people within the vast city of Moscow who deeply hate the current Putin regime, who are strongly against the ongoing war with Ukraine, and who unequivocally support Ukraine, I say this with deliberate emphasis and conviction, they most definitely and undeniably exist. But their number is not critically large enough to start a rebellion. And then there's fear. Listen, fear has enveloped all of Russian society. It's frightening. I understand that. But the Russian authorities are acting lawlessly. Of course it's frightening. But there are these people in Moscow. There is a non-critical number of them. But Moscow must feel the war the way Kyiv feels it. Maybe even more so. So what do we have so far? Somewhere out there, there's a war going on, just somewhere out there. Here in Moscow, the stores sell exactly the same things as before the war. In restaurants on the Patriot ponds or in 5-star hotels, they serve oysters with Chanticleer just like they always did. There are no changes at all. Holidays are celebrated, concerts are held, theaters are full, the city is lit up, and there are almost no air raid alerts. Well, the airports have started to close, yes, already, but that only affects a rather small number of people. That's what I'm calling Muscovites in this case. Moscow truly needs to feel the full impact of the war in order to ask its own damn leadership. What exactly is going on here? Why are we even being bombed? Oh, right. You declared war on Ukraine 3.5 years ago, invaded their sovereign territory, tried to enslave them, but you ultimately failed. So please leave. End this terrible mess. Do you genuinely want us to be bombed? What do we have to do with this whole situation? That would be the typical point of view of the average Muscovite citizen. What do I have to do with this? He'll say. It was Putin who made the decision, not me. And as long as they have everything in the stores, in the restaurants, and outwardly all this facade remains the same, they won't even start thinking about the war. They will only start to think about it when there are constant air raid alarms, hours long, terrible traffic jams, a collapse in the streets, when the metro is packed with people trying to wait out the alarms. When this goes on through sleepless nights for them only, then will they ask what's going on. But as long as nothing specific is flying toward Moscow, they don't even have that question. Well, there's a war going on somewhere. Some suckers are going off to die for money, but that's their own business. What about us? We didn't start this war. Putin needs it that way. To hell with them, with Putin and those suckers who go off to die for cash and actually die. Moscow doesn't feel the war. That's why I stick to the following theory. We need to get more missiles. We already have a lot, but we need to get more missiles, both ours and foreign ones. After that, I think Volodymyr Zelensky can confidently address Putin and say, Vladimir Putin officially declared that if, starting from midnight tomorrow, missiles and drones fly into Ukrainian territory, we will strike back multiple times. That's it. If they fly, well, then an intense bombing of Moscow begins. Not residential neighborhoods, God forbid, not civilians, no, not, I don't know, kindergartens. Not like how those bastards launch missiles here at Ohmadi. No. Military targets, concentrations of military equipment, the general stuff. Anything military. Right there, right there. That's what I'm for. I believe that's how it should be. This is war, guys. We didn't start it. You've been engaged in terrorism for 3.5 years. You are terrorizing the peaceful Ukrainian population. Many of our children are already stuttering. From sheer terror, we are raising a generation of war children. What did you truly believe that this would just simply pass for you without any consequences? No, it certainly won't.
Dmitry, about the Tomahawks. Why is this being hyped up in the media right now? Well, we all understand perfectly well that unfortunately Ukraine won't get Tomahawks, but in terms of information, how, right?
I don't know. So, look, Trump is an interesting guy. I've already told you, remember? Trump is not the hero of my story. I'll say it again. I'll say it again. He's not the hero of my story, but he's a damn interesting figure. Dasha, we've talked about this many times, remember? I said that no one is allowed to mock the greatest and most powerful country in the world and its legitimately elected president. We've discussed this constantly. I said that sooner or later, Trump and those behind Trump would lose their patience. They'd get furious. They'd just become enraged. And then Putin will be in real trouble. So, as I understand the party's policy, I think that if Trump sees, look, Kellogg has already been in Kyiv for several days. Today is the second day, I think. Today is Wednesday. It's our third day. Kellogg has been in Kyiv for 3 days and will stay another 4 days. Everyone is already saying that we need to set up a duty schedule for American leaders and officials. Because as long as Kellogg is here, Kyiv isn't being bombed.
Yes.
This only means one thing: Putin is scared. I'm calling things by their names. Bombing Kyiv while Americans are here. That means he's afraid of America, afraid of Trump. It's only logical. If he really didn't care, if he was such a tough guy, I do whatever I want. Well, Kellogg, I don't give a damn. He would bomb everything and everyone. No, he doesn't bomb. He doesn't bomb, he's afraid. He's not made of steel, he's scared. So there's no need to make him out to be some kind of monster who fears nothing. No. is human with his own fears. We need to bring those fears to the surface, stir them up, and use those very fears to take him down. So about Trump, if Putin keeps making a fool out of Trump and keeps playing dumb himself, if he keeps mocking him in front of the whole world, Trump says, enough, this has to stop. But Putin keeps fighting. I absolutely wouldn't rule out Trump launching Tomahawks. Really, I absolutely wouldn't rule it out. Why not? He's unrestrained, he's tough, we can see that. He is certainly capable of making complex and impactful decisions that are, in essence, quite non-linear in their approach and outcome. He's capable of taking action. In business, you can't succeed if you just follow a template. Business favors people who think outside the box, and Trump came to our world from that environment. That's why he acts the same way in politics. That's why I have a feeling, a strong one, in fact, that if Putin starts acting up, it'll come to Tomahawk. And it will happen quickly.
Dmitry Ilyich, naturally, Trump stated that after the 50 days he gave Putin to make peace or reach a peace agreement, the Russian leader will want peace. That's what Trump thinks. He often says he wants peace. I think he does want it. I hope he wants it. We'll find out soon. End of quote. So then the US president said,
there was, excuse me, Dasha, there was a song like that. You want to, but you stay silent. So he wants to, but stays silent.
Yes. Unfortunately, he neither wants to nor stays silent, but attacks and kills. The US president has now said that he does not plan to provide Ukraine with long-range weapons. It's unclear about the jazz. Next, Reuters writes that despite threats to tighten sanctions, Putin will expand territorial claims as his troops advance. He intends to continue military actions until the West accepts his terms for peace.
What confuses me? Here's what confuses me about this time frame, 50 days. Honestly, it bothers me. Why 50 days? Why not 20 days? Why not 10? Why not 3 days? Why 50? This is where I'm ready to discuss the topic, because I did the math right away. Well, that's roughly until the 1st of September. And by the 1st of September, summer is over. And summer is the best opportunity to go on the offensive. So you could also say that Trump, by agreement with Putin, is giving him 50 days to try to seize more territory from Ukraine so that later he can finish things off with some successes on the ground, if there are any. So far, we've already passed the midpoint of summer. Summer has crossed its equatorial. There have been no breakthroughs. We can see that, right? I'll let you in on a secret. Honestly, there can't be any. Unless, of course, something extraordinary happens. But there can't be any big, well, it's a long story why. The military explains to me why breakthroughs are basically impossible. Neither theirs nor ours. Unless we get some interesting new weapon. But that's a separate topic for discussion. So I have a vague suspicion that Trump and Putin have come to an agreement, and Trump is giving him time until the end of summer. Maybe it's just a vague suspicion and has nothing to do with Trump's actual plan. But then I have a question, why 50 days? Well, why not 10, for example? I don't understand. That's what I don't understand. I'm being sincere. In any case, we see a Europe that has awakened, that is now working like clockwork, that is ready to spend money, yes, on Ukraine, on its own armament, is rearming at a rapid pace. Germany is especially pleasing in this regard. I know very well what the Germans are like. They are very precise, clear, diligent, creative, and punctual people who, if they need something, will do it at the highest level, from the most delicate medical equipment to Mercedes cars. That's why, of course, I imagine, and we also know a bit of history, how the Germans know how to pull themselves together in tough times. What is the German war machine? That's why I suspect that the Germans, they've caught on quickly now. Their largest corporation has hired 70,000 people quickly. and it's already operating in such a way that its shares have surpassed the combined value of Mercedes and BMW shares. It is second only to Lockheed Martin, the American arms corporation. That's why I think the Germans will now be the locomotive of Europe. Europe will rearm quickly while simultaneously arming Ukraine. They won't back down anymore. They've understood everything about Russia. No one needs to explain anything about Russia to anyone anymore. Everyone already understands everything. There's no way back now. There isn't.
Except for Trump.
That's why
Trump still, except for Trump. Trump still lives in illusions, says that he is not on anyone's side, does not support anyone, and so on and so forth.
Dasha, no, we will not primitivize Trump. Trump.
Dmitry Ilyich copes with this perfectly well himself, without us.
Trump is a negotiator. Trump understands, look, I've talked about this. He gives him a chance to Putin. He said, this is my friend. I have a great time with him. He didn't vote for the UN resolutions. He said, right now, we won't give Ukraine anything. Zelensky is bad, doesn't respect me, isn't grateful. We gave them so much. But what if it hadn't been for Biden and so on? He was making passes. That's diplomacy. He was making passes to Putin. Look, I'm behaving decently towards you. Come on, wrap it up. I need you to finish. People close to Trump tell me that Trump genuinely doesn't understand why anyone would fight a war at all when you could be making money, trading, making money, doing business. Only fools go to war. Well, fools fight, smart people make money. And that's why he genuinely wants to end this war. And to Putin, here, pass. Here's another pass for you. Here, take the pass. Look, I'm doing it right, aren't I? Now it's your turn. Come on, you go now. But Putin doesn't. Putin says, Trump is a wonderful person. We had a great conversation, and then he bombs Kyiv. And as I said, one day Trump's patience would snap, it would snap. Well, it did snap. How else could it have been? What do you think Putin would have made a laughingstock out of Trump? Mocked him in front of everyone? How do you imagine that? Compare America with all its power and compare it to Russia. Besides, yes, American people tell me Trump is going to abandon Ukraine now. I've always said, and I keep saying, don't talk nonsense. They simply can't abandon Ukraine because then Americans wouldn't be able to talk to anyone at all. As soon as they start supporting someone, people will say, but you abandoned Ukraine. And before that, you abandoned Afghanistan. And if they abandon Ukraine too, that's a sign of a loser. So you're losers. You're not the coolest guys on planet Earth at all. You're nobody. You say you'll be friends, and then you betray your friends. So how can anyone do business with you? But Trump could never go for that because it would damage America's image. Well, it's elementary, Watson, what I'm saying right now. That's why Trump was giving him signals, giving him openings, but he didn't respond. And Trump said, well, you jerk, is that how you want it? Is that how you're going to behave with me? All right, then. All right. Now I'm going to hit you where it hurts, and that's it. That's how it works. So I have no doubt that based on what I'm saying, Europe will never turn its back on Ukraine. The US will never turn its back on Ukraine. They will provide everything. And here, look, the interests have aligned. In fact, the interests have aligned phenomenally. The Americans are showing themselves as the masters of the world. At the same time, they're not giving weapons to Ukraine for free, but selling them through Europe. And as Trump says, not a single cent from Americans is going to support Ukraine. What's more, we've boosted our military-industrial complex, given jobs to millions of people who pay taxes. We're strengthening America. Brilliant. It's a brilliant deal for America. Europe. It's a brilliant deal for Europe. Europe has money, spending it on weapons perfect. Now, with these weapons, Ukraine will be able to handle Russia. It's good for Europe, but it's good for us too. Here, the only one suffering is Putin. Only the Russian side is suffering. Everyone else is completely in the plus. So that's why we should be in a good mood, in my opinion. There's no reason to feel bad. Ideally, of course, it would be great if Kellogg could stay here a bit longer. And I would like to address Vitaly Klitschko, to ask him on behalf of the city to give Kellogg an apartment in Ukraine and to Volodymyr Zelensky to grant Mr. Kellogg Ukrainian citizenship.
We already allowed dual citizenship, and in America it's been allowed for a long time. So that Mr. Kellogg could live here in an apartment allocated by the Kyiv City Council, and then, well, Kyiv won't be bombed. That's it.
Dmitry Ilyich, regarding military aid, or more precisely the purchase of American weapons by our partners. So, American weapons for Ukraine as part of Trump's initiative have been agreed to be financed by Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Norway, Denmark, and Canada. At the same time, France will not be joining, Italy will not be joining, and the Czech Republic will not be joining. They will not be buying weapons from the US. Why?
I think it's much simpler than that. The coalition countries have divided responsibilities among themselves.
Right.
So the French have a powerful military industry. I think the French will produce their own weapons and supply them to Ukraine. That will be their contribution. Some will produce on their own, like the French. The Czechs also have a formidable military industry dating back to the 1930s, when Škoda was in operation. Hitler dreamed of capturing Czechoslovakia as quickly as possible, along with Škoda, which was running at full capacity for the military complex. So I think these countries will simply make their contribution with their own products. And some, like Germany, will contribute both with their own products and by purchasing from others. So they will come to an agreement, they will reach an understanding. The main thing to understand, Dasha, is that the verdict for Putin and Russia has been signed, and there is no turning back. That is absolutely clear to me. No one is going anywhere. They will press him until the end, because otherwise it will be bad for them. They understand, after all, listen, it would be naive, it would be foolish to imagine, yes, foolish, that the whole world loves Ukraine so much that they're ready to spend their own money just so Ukraine can hold on. But every leader of every country thinks first and foremost about their own country. It is in the Europeans' interest for Ukraine to win, because if, God forbid, Ukraine were to lose, Putin would rush further towards them. Drunk on Ukrainian blood, he would go after them. He would definitely go into the Baltic country. He would rush into Poland. And the French, for example, think, well, all right, he won't go to France, that's clear, but he will go to the Baltic countries. But we have to stand up for the Baltic countries. According to Article 5, we have to go to war with Russia. So one way or another, do you understand what the situation is? That's why we need to support Ukraine, so that Ukraine can deal with these fascists. And then everything will be fine for Europe.
Dmitry, of course, the most important news is the 18th package of EU sanctions against Russia. They will continue to discuss it all the way until July 18th. Discussion of the 18th package of sanctions against Russia will be included in the agenda of the EU General Affairs Council meeting on the 18th of July. Slovakia and Malta are still blocking. They don't want to, but the problem is that today Kallas said that this is very bad. But again, they cannot accept this package.
Dasha, what kind of package? 18. Therefore, which July should it be considered? In general, the 18th, that's logical. This is clear. Yes, that's exactly how it works. The 17th package was examined on the 17th.
Are you interested in numerology? Let's be honest.
No, not at all.
Not at all? Look, our interview comes out on the 17th of July, 2025. Just for the record, on the 17th...
As my favorite Vysotsky sang, I pity you followers of fatal dates and numbers. So, well, he wasn't talking about us. So, Malta and Slovakia too. Well, Fico, it's clear that he's a scoundrel. It's obvious that he's funded by Russia, just like Orban, another scoundrel, right? But in this case, Dasha, it's all about bargaining. It's like a European marketplace where everyone is told, well, you have to sign, and everyone understands. Yes, you have to sign. Fico's task from Putin is to stall things. But there are certain points after all. He doesn't live in Russia, nor with Russia. He lives in the European Union. So there are levels of pressure on him as well. And in the end, they tell him, what do you want? You? He says, well, I would. Well, like this. Well, this? Okay, then here you go. Take this. And also this. And also this. Aren't you getting a bit greedy? Well, then we'll prepare something bad for you now. It's all very simple. Slovakia is a small country. It depends on the decisions of the European Union, of Germany, of France. Well, that's all obvious. So no, they'll put up some resistance just for show. Fico will work off the money that Putin sent him for his disruptive activities within the European Union. But in the end, everyone will agree, and the 18th package will be implemented. No one will be able to do anything about it. Of course.
All right, so we've settled that. Now, as for the 17 Patriot systems, so as usual, Trump said 17 Patriot systems. After that, no one understood what he meant. Launchers.
He didn't understand it himself.
So Trump himself called mirths after another attack on Ukraine and unexpectedly agreed to sell more Patriots. Wall Street Journal. According to the Wall Street Journal, Donald Trump surprised German Chancellor Merz when, after another Russian strike on Ukraine, he called him personally and agreed to sell not 2, but 5 Patriot systems to Kyiv at once. The Wall Street Journal writes 5 systems. Trump said 17. What's going on?
Apparently, Trump confused systems with batteries. Probably 5 systems, 17 batteries, but we need to wait and see so that we don't just read tea leaves here. That wouldn't be right. We need to wait for specifics. Trump could have mixed it up. There could have been translation difficulties. He could have, you know how Trump talks. I've noticed he often skips words, he often leaves out connecting words. So he could have said systems of batteries. He just skipped it, said 17 Patriot, and then he moved on. His mind works fast, you can tell, it works quickly. So we'll find out soon what and how many there will be.
Dmitry Ilyich. Now let's talk about Melania Trump. When I heard this story about Melania...
Sorry. Can I tell you, in my opinion, what's more important than Patriot?
Of course.
Offensive missiles. They are sobering. They are very sobering. If it were possible, I would say I would get a bunch of offensive missiles. And then I would speak to Putin in the language of an ultimatum. 1 more missile on Kyiv and tomorrow 3 on Moscow. For every one of your missiles, we respond with 3. Especially since it's very difficult for the Russians to shoot down Western missiles. Missiles like Taurus, Takemes, these are very serious missiles, very serious. And of course, they will shoot some down, but most will reach their targets, and that will be serious. These are strikes, you understand. Strikes on Moscow are nails in the coffin of Putin and the Putin regime. This needs to be understood very clearly. Well, anyone in Russia would say, well, look where we've ended up. We used to live normally. I mean, these are simple, primitive thoughts, but life was normal until that bastard went to war in Ukraine. And now we're being hit. So what's happened? Is it because of him that things have come to this? So is he to blame? Things used to be fine, and now they're bad. That's how ordinary people think. If he had taken Ukraine in 3 days, or hell, even in half a year, the overwhelming majority of the Russian population would have said, well done. He taught those Nazis, those Banderites a lesson. He put them in their place. He showed the strength of Russian weapons the right way. But since he got bogged down for 3.5 years, Russia has lost almost 1 million people. And now there are economic problems. And from here on out, it only gets worse and worse. That's when they start, after all, their people, they start saying, but things used to be good. What's going on? Why is this happening? Why did it have to be this way? You know how Russians say, so what? So what? We had a guy like that in the army. He used to say, what? What's up? Yeah, that's exactly what I want to say to all Russians.
So does that mean JASSM missiles could reach Moscow and St. Petersburg?
Well, for Ukrainians, JASSM missiles are better than an orgasm. See, I'm already writing poetry. Of course, they could reach there. I'll tell you more, they almost certainly will.
God willing.
Petersburg, again, for me, Petersburg is not a priority city. I would direct everything at Moscow. Everything we have at Moscow. Everything happens in the capital. Everything is decided in the capital. To Moscow, that's right, everything there.
Dmitry, and for the finale, I've prepared a topic.
So that Dasha, Zelensky would also address Russians, Muscovites, and say, Muscovites, leave Moscow, leave, it's going to get very hot. We don't want casualties, leave, evacuate Moscow. That's how it's done.
Air raid alert in Moscow.
Not just leave, but leave things are going to get much worse. That's what I would do.
I would really like to hear those Soviet phrases, air raid alert in Moscow, but for it all to actually be in Moscow.
And they do have it. They do have it, just not as often as needed.
Dmitry, for the finale, Melania Trump. Her name is Melania Trump or Trumpenko. So when Trump said this at the press conference, I think it was with Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, I thought it was his way of presenting why he made this decision. It's a kind of soft PR approach that he simply used as a communicator to get his point across that in reality, Melania Trump never said this. It's just a way of presenting the material, a little trick. But since Melania Trump is friends with Alexandra Nikolenko, Miss Ukraine, who, by the way, married Trump's business partner thanks to Melania Trump, and they lived together in the same room when they participated in beauty pageants, do you think Melania Trump could be an advocate for Ukraine in Trump's eyes and, in a way, the best lobbyist for Ukraine if Melania truly supports Ukraine?
Oh, I didn't know that Melania lived with Sasha in the same room. I didn't know that. Is that what they say? Yes?
When we discussed the inauguration, by the way, we also talked about Donald Trump's inauguration with you, and Sasha Nikolaenko was there with her husband. At that time, a huge number of analytical articles appeared, which said that Sasha Nikolaenko and Melania Trump were together in the same room, that they are friends, and that it was Melania Trump who introduced Sasha Nikolaenko to Trump's business partner, who is now her husband.
Very interesting. I didn't know that. Look, I've known Sasha Nikolaenko since 2002. She was Miss Ukraine. She studied in Odessa, was Miss Ukraine. And I remember when she came to Kyiv, how we met at an event in the Kyiv Palace, Ukraine. Later, I participated. Wow. I was a jury member at the contest she organized. She's a very pleasant, very good person, Alexandra Nikolaenko. And I want to say that, yes, she married Phil Ruffin. Phil Ruffin is one of Donald Trump's closest friends and business partners. And yes, at the inauguration, we all saw those shots. Alexander Nikolaenko and Phil Ruffin were right next to America's first couple. Of course, Sasha can't help but care deeply about the fate of her homeland. Undoubtedly, she is a person, a living person. And it's quite possible that she and Melania Trump somehow played a role in getting Trump to turn toward Ukraine. This is more in the realm of reading tea leaves. I don't know for sure, but I could find out.
There you go. And that's a wonderful ending, dear audience. Next time, Dmitry Ilyich will come with new insider information. Next Thursday, he'll tell you the whole story. Whether Melania really does have a close connection to Sasha Nikolaenko now, what happened, and our audience will be waiting for it.
Right now, someone from the inner circle is intently watching us, observing our every move.
Right.
About this couple, Alexandra Nikolaenko and Phil Ruffin, whom I would definitely ask about this. And if he can talk about it, certainly knows, but if he can share it, he will. If he tells me and allows me to share it with everyone, then I'll talk about it next time. Let's make a note of this. It'll be interesting.
Friends, that's what I call a gripping finale. Friends, please like this video. Stay tuned for next Thursday. We'll lay all our cards on the table because we have plenty of them. Subscribe to Dmitry Gordon and Olesha Batsman's YouTube channels. Subscribe to Dmitry Gordon's Telegram channel, Instagram, TikTok, and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Dasha Shasivaya. Dmitry, thank you so much, and I can't wait for next Thursday.
Thank you, Dasha, and thank you to our wonderful audience. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes.